Prologue. The road and the reason to leave it was a late winter dawn when we finally left our home in New Jersey. The yard was damp with melting snow, and the potted plants by the porch had frozen overnight. 40 years of our lives lingered in those walls, in the worn wallpaper, in the scratches on the wooden floor. I drew the curtain halfway and watched as the first grey light spilled into the living room. Charles was outside, quietly shutting the truck bed. They say leaving is a beginning, but that morning, it felt more like an ending. The road stretched endlessly south. The sky was pale, and the snow gave way to red earth. From the back seat, Molly pressed her nose against the window, watching the house grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared. Her slow breathing filled the silence, a sound that marked the end of something familiar. We were heading for Arizona, to a retirement community just south of Phoenix, a place that promised warmth instead of snow, lower taxes, open skies, and quiet days filled with sun, but no brochure ever mentioned loneliness. Outside, the scenery began to change, snow into sand, trees into cactus. Younger people call it moving, but for our generation, it felt more like unpacking what's left of time. The radio broke the silence. Today in Phoenix, 74 degrees and sunny. Charles smiled faintly. They say it never snows there. I nodded. Though in my heart, it was still winter. By the time the sun began to set, the horizon was on fire with red light. The desert air came through the open window. Warm, dry, unfamiliar. Molly lifted her head, as if asking, "Are we really okay?" I didn't answer. The sun dipped low, and I realized something quietly profound. Retirement isn't about starting again. It's about learning how to fade, gently. As the desert cooled, Molly rested her head on my hand and fell asleep. Her warmth was the only piece of home we had left. Between the end of a day and the start of another life, we just kept driving. Chapter 1. The morning after. Too quiet a house. The night was long. Silence hung thick in the air, a kind of quiet that echoed against the new walls. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sign of life. When dawn came, a soft red light bled through the window cracks. Our first morning in Arizona. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The floor was cold, the air smelled of dry soil, and even the wind carried no scent. That scentless air made me uneasy. The living room was spotless, too spotless. 2 new mugs sat on the table, their white glaze reflecting the sunlight. Everything was clean and new, yet empty of any trace of us. Molly padded across the tile, her nails clicking softly. She rested her chin on my foot, the warmth of her breath grounding me. I turned on the kettle. The sound of boiling water filled the stillness. From the yard, Charles's voice drifted in. He was setting up the chairs, checking the direction of the morning light. "The sun's nice here," he said. I handed him a cup of coffee. The light caught his rough hands, turning them gold. The brochures had called this place paradise. Warm, peaceful, safe, but paradise, I thought, is simply a place without noise. And without noise, you start to disappear. I read through the community guidebook. It said, "Check your air filter, register with a local clinic, set up your emergency contact list, walk your pet before 8 a.m. Simple instructions, but they felt like survival tips for a new planet. At 10 a.m. the heat rose quickly. Molly panted, her tongue out. I filled her water bowl and placed it by the window. The light shimmered on the surface of the water, dancing across the ceiling. It was beautiful and unbearably quiet. For the first time, I realized silence could have weight, and that weight was heavy enough to press against my chest. Chapter 2. Friendly neighbors, locked hearts. The sunlight was sharp, cutting through the morning air. The desert sky was too bright to hide anything. Our second day in Arizona, I finally saw the neighbors. A golf cart passed by. An elderly couple waved. "Morning," they called. Their voices were cheerful, fleeting, like wind. Everyone smiled here, at strangers, at dogs, at the emptiness between houses. It was kindness, but rehearsed kindness. No one asked where you came from, only what lot number you lived on. At 9, I joined a yoga class. The gym smelled like new paint and lavender spray. "Welcome, new residents," said a banner on the wall. The woman beside me smiled. "Where are you from?" "New Jersey," I answered. She nodded. "Good choice. Winters are awful there." Then she closed her eyes again. After class, the instructor said, "See you Thursday." And everyone dispersed like waves on sand. I walked outside into the burning light. The air shimmered. In a nearby yard, a pond reflected the sky, clear, still, lifeless. Back home, Charles sat by the TV. "How was the golf club?" I asked. "People were nice," he said, then paused. But everyone seemed busy, the kind of busy that fills silence, not time. That evening, Molly watched the window, maybe waiting for a sound that no longer existed. Our son's voice. Our grandchild's laugh, the winter birds of the east. Her gaze met mine, and I realized she understood loneliness before we did. Later, a neighbor, Linda, stopped by. "Don't walk in the afternoon," she said kindly. "The sun here isn't forgiving." Then she smiled and added, "The first few weeks are the hardest. Nights are quiet, and thoughts get louder." Her words stayed with me. Adaptation comes slow, but solitude arrives fast. That night I lay in bed, watching the ceiling glow faintly from the streetlight outside. Everyone here was kind. Everyone here was smiling. And yet, behind each smile, there was a locked door. Chapter 3. The grandchild's laugh through a phone Sunday morning was silent, except for the ticking clock. Charles brewed coffee, the same way he always did, measured, calm, steady. His routine felt like an anchor holding us in place. Then the phone rang. Our son's name appeared. It had been a while. When I answered, Ella's face filled the screen. "Grandma, we went to the pool today." Her laughter was so pure, it warmed the entire room. I smiled. "You look beautiful." Ella, but the warmth I saw on the screen never reached my hands. Distance has a temperature, cold, invisible, unchangeable. Charles watched quietly beside me. The call lasted 20 minutes. We talked about the heat, the weather, the new house. I said, "It's dry here, but nice." Half true. The doctor had warned us. The desert's air is kind, but stay hydrated. It steals moisture faster than you notice. When the screen went dark, silence returned instantly. Molly laid her head on my lap. Her warmth was the only heartbeat in the room. Charles whispered, "She's growing so fast." His voice trembled slightly. Outside, the sky was impossibly blue, so bright it felt far away. That night, I opened an old album, our son's first steps, his wedding day, family vacations by the ocean, smiling faces frozen in time. I traced my finger over one photo and thought, back then we lived so close. People say that after 3 months, families call less, not from neglect, just rhythm. But rhythm can build distance, and distance can become silence. Before bed, Charles wrote in his journal, "Today, I saw Ella laugh." That laugh carried my whole day. I watched him write, and outside, a single star rose over the desert. Out here, the stars felt closer, but under their light, we felt smaller and a little more transparent. Chapter 4. Molly's shadow that morning. Molly didn't eat. The dog who used to wake me, with her tail thumping, now lay quietly under the bed. I called her. Name. Molly. She lifted her head slowly. Her eyes had grown dim. I carried her in my arms. She felt lighter than before. Charles didn't speak as he started the car. We drove to the vet in silence. The desert sky was mercilessly clear, as if it refused to mourn. The clinic sign read, "Senior Pet Care," because they deserve comfort. My throat tightened. The vet, a young man with kind eyes, said gently, "Her heart is slowing down. The dry air makes it harder for her." He handed me a small bag of medicine. "Walk her only early in the morning, and keep her hydrated. Old age needs more care in this climate." I nodded. But the words old age lingered like dust. On the drive home, Charles said nothing. Molly lay on my lap, her breathing slow, uneven. Every pause between breaths felt endless. After that day, she slept more. I covered her with a small blanket, placed a bowl of cool water beside her. As the ice melted, I counted the drops, each one a second I didn't want to lose. Charles sat beside her each evening, his hand resting on her side. Sometimes he whispered, "You okay, girl?" But I knew the question was really for himself. Linda came by with a small bag of medicine. "It happens often here," she said softly. "Not every life fits this sunshine." Her words stayed with me. Warmth, comfort, paradise. Those words meant something different now. At night, Molly would crawl to my side. Her warmth filled the space beside me. I knew it wouldn't last. I stroked her fur and whispered, "Thank you for coming all this way with us." When she took her last breath, the room didn't change, only the air grew still. The moonlight touched her fur, turning it silver. I closed my eyes, and for a moment the world stood still. Chapter 5. The empty sofa. The sky was painfully blue the day Molly left. Her stillness was so gentle, it took a while to understand. I ran my fingers through her fur, soft, but cooling fast. Charles brought a blanket. We didn't speak, we didn't need. To the vet called later. She went peacefully, he said. Peaceful. The word people use when they don't know what else to say. We brought home a small box with her name on the tag. The nurse had suggested, "Many here place a small stone or marker in their yard. It helps." Somehow, I realized then, loss was common here, almost routine. We buried her under the soft sand in the corner of the yard where the light was kind. Charles placed her collar over the stone. He sat there for a long time. His shoulders trembled. Inside, the house felt hollow. The sofa, her favorite spot, was spotless, too clean. I turned on the TV. The noise bounced off the walls and died. Silence filled the room again. For days, we barely spoke. Our conversations shrank to fragments. What's for dinner? Something simple. Each word felt heavy, but beneath the silence, we shared the same ache. At night, I caught myself glancing at the sofa. The emptiness hurt more than I expected. I whispered, "Good night, Molly." The words vanished into the air, and tears followed quietly. The next morning, Charles planted a small cactus over her grave. "This one lasts long," he said, "even without water." I realized it wasn't for her. It was for us. People say retirement brings freedom. One says how quiet that freedom can be. That night, I sat on the sofa again. I listened for her breathing in the dark. But there was only the sound of my own, and I understood what we'd lost wasn't just her. It was movement, the gentle rhythm of life itself. Chapter 6. Back in the sunlight, weeks passed. The air began to change. The mornings were softer, the wind less dry. It had been 3 weeks since Molly left. Charles woke early. "Coffee outside?" he asked. We stepped into the yard. The cactus we planted stood tall, and beneath it new sprouts had appeared. Sunlight brushed the sand, and for the first time the warmth didn't hurt. We walked the trail near our house, the same path we once avoided. Neighbors waved, "Good morning." Their smiles felt real this time, perhaps because ours did too. Linda waved from afar. "There's a flea market today," she called. "Everyone's bringing old things to share." Charles chuckled. "Perfect. We have boxes we haven't opened yet." In the garage, we opened the dusty cartons from New Jersey, old books, photo frames, Molly's bowl. I picked it up, smiling. "Let's keep this one," I said. Charles nodded. "For the garden." At the market, laughter filled the air. Cookies, trinkets, music. Nothing grand, but all alive. The sun was bright, but today it felt gentle. Linda smiled. "Out here, we don't avoid the sun. We learn to live with it." I thought about that all day. Maybe aging is like that too. Not about hiding, but learning how to stand in the light. That evening, the living room glowed with gold. On the floor near the window, a tiny green leaf had pushed through the soil. I touched it gently and whispered, "We're okay now," Charles wrote in his journal that night. Today, the sunlight felt different. I looked over his shoulder and said softly, "Molly would have liked it." He smiled and took my hand. The desert moon rose, bright, patient, forgiving, and for the first time, the silence in our house felt full, not empty. Epilogue, the desert sunset. And the time that remains, the sun was sinking over the desert, and the sky was painted with slow-moving fire. Each evening, as the light began to fade, I found myself waiting for it, that quiet, ember hour when the world seemed to breathe again. The sunsets in Arizona were nothing like those in New Jersey. Here, the light lingered longer. As if time itself refused to end, it moved slowly, tenderly, giving us one more minute to hold on. It had been 2 months since Molly left us. The white cactus we planted still stood firm in the yard, and beside it, a small green sprout had begun to grow. Every morning, Charles would set his coffee next to it and sit in silence for a while before starting the day. His movements were slower now, but steady, like the desert wind. I walk with him these days. The community trail glows with the color of autumn light. The air is still dry, but somehow softer, as if the land has begun to accept us. Maybe it's not the desert that changed. Maybe it's us. Neighbors still wave and say, "Good morning." And now I no longer feel like a stranger. When we first came here, their smiles felt like thin glass, polite, breakable. Now I see warmth in them, perhaps because I finally learned to smile back. Linda still teaches yoga at the community hall. At the end of class today, she said, "The sun isn't something to hide from, it's something to breathe with." Her words stayed with me. It wasn't just advice about sunlight, it was a way to live through old age. By evening, the house fills with gold. Light crawls across the walls, touches the sofa where Molly once slept, and fades away slowly, as if whispering goodbye. Each time that glow disappears, I quietly say, "Thank you for staying with us today." One day, our son sent a photo, Ella's first day of school. She stood with her tiny backpack, smiling wide. I looked at that picture for a long time. Her smile felt like sunlight, distant, yet enough to warm the whole room. When night falls, the desert sky turns into a sea of stars. Out here they feel closer, clearer, as if you could almost touch them, and I thought, maybe this is what life really is. You lose something, you grow something again and again. A quiet, endless circle. That night, Charles wrote in his journal, "The desert days move slowly, but I've come to love their pace." I read it over his shoulder and added my own line beneath it. "Under the same sunlight, we're still learning how to love." We didn't speak after that. We just sat there, hand in hand, as the last bit of light slipped behind the horizon. A breeze passed through, gently stirring the silence between us, and in that moment, I understood retirement isn't about stopping life. It's about reclaiming time, about learning to move slowly again. And within that slower rhythm, we are still alive. The sunset faded. The sky turned deep blue. From a distance, I heard Linda laughing. Her voice carried softly by the wind. I didn't close the window. I wanted the air to come in, warm and full of life, turning this house once again into a home.